Close your eyes and let yourself drift back through time, back to a world where winter wasn't just a season, but a test of everything you are. We're traveling to the 9th century, somewhere near the Arctic Circle, where the Norse people carved out lives in conditions so brutal they seem almost impossible. Tonight, we're going to explore how these remarkable people survived months of darkness and cold without the fireplaces we take for granted, without central heating, without any of the comforts that make winter bearable in our modern world. Take a deep breath and imagine stepping off an invisible time platform directly into knee-deep snow. The sky overhead is the color of cold iron, that peculiar gray that seems to absorb light rather than reflect it. The wind cuts through every layer you're wearing, seeking out skin with the precision of a surgeon's blade. Around you stretches a Viking settlement, not the raiding warriors of legend, but families simply trying to survive until spring returns. The first thing that strikes you is the profound quiet. Snow muffles everything, creating a silence so complete it feels almost sacred. In the distance, you can make out several long, low structures partially buried in snowdrifts. These are the long houses, and they look nothing like what you expected. There are no chimneys rising from thatched roofs, no smoke billowing from brick structures. Instead, thin trails of smoke seep lazily from small holes in the roofs, as if even the fire is too tired to fight the cold. You make your way toward the nearest long house, your boots crunching in snow that squeaks with each step, a sound that only happens when temperatures drop far below freezing. The door is surprisingly short, forcing you to duck as you enter. This isn't an architectural quirk, but a deliberate design, minimizing the opening through which precious warmth could escape into the hungry cold outside. Inside, the contrast is immediate. The air is warmer, yes, but also thick with smoke, humid with breath and bodies, heavy with the mingled sense of unwashed wool, animal fur, cooking food, and wood smoke. Your eyes water as they adjust to the dim interior. The only light comes from a small fire crackling in a shallow pit at the center of the room, and from the weak daylight filtering through the smoke hole above. This fire is not what you expected. It's modest, almost sulking, more suitable for cooking than heating. There's no roaring hearth, no fireplace with a mantel, no chimney drawing smoke efficiently away. Just this small pit with flames that seem more interested in producing smoke than warmth. And yet, somehow, the space is survivable. Not comfortable by modern standards, but warm enough to sustain life through months when stepping outside unprepared means death. The long house stretches before you, much longer than it is wide. Along both sides are raised wooden platforms covered with layers of animal hides and furs. People are wrapped in these like living burritos, sharing warmth, their breath creating small clouds in the air. You notice something unexpected. Chickens roosting in corners, a dog curled near the fire, and yes, those are definitely goats at the far end of the structure. The Vikings didn't just tolerate animals in their homes. They relied on them as living furnaces. A gray-bearded man named Halvard slides a cup of something hot toward you. The liquid smells fermented and medicinal, but you accept it gratefully. He grunts what you hope is a greeting and gestures for you to sit near the fire. The heat on your face is welcome, but you quickly realize it doesn't extend far. A few feet from the flames, the temperature drops noticeably. The fire's job isn't to heat the entire space. That would be impossible and wasteful. Instead, it provides a warm core, while other strategies handle the real work of keeping everyone alive. You begin to understand the genius of Viking winter survival. It's not about one big solution, but countless small ones working together. The thick walls packed with turf and moss. The low roof designed to trap heat close to the floor where people live. The animals providing supplemental warmth. The sleeping platforms keeping bodies off the cold ground. The shared body heat of a dozen people huddled together. Every element works in concert, creating a survival system that doesn't fight the Arctic winter so much as it carefully negotiates with it. As your eyes fully adjust, You notice details that speak to months of preparation. Bundles of dried herbs hang from the rafters. Smoked fish and meat dangle like strange ornaments. Tools and weapons line the walls within easy reach. Every inch of space serves a purpose. There's no room for decoration or waste when survival demands efficiency above all else. The people around you move with deliberate economy. No wasted energy, no unnecessary movement. It's not laziness, but conservation. Understanding that calories spent must be calories earned back. A woman mends clothing with small, precise stitches. A boy carves something from a piece of driftwood, his movements slow and meditative. An elderly woman sorts through dried beans, her fingers working by touch as much as sight in the dim light. You settle onto one of the sleeping platforms, feeling the give of straw and hide beneath you. The furs are heavy, warm from previous occupants, and surprisingly comfortable once you stop comparing them to modern mattresses. Lying here, you can feel the house breathing around you, the subtle give and flex of timber, the whisper of wind finding tiny gaps in the turf, the communal warmth rising like invisible steam. Outside, night is falling, though in this latitude during deep winter, the distinction between day and night becomes almost meaningless. The world exists in varying shades of darkness, from the deep black of midnight to the pale gray of what passes for noon. The Vikings measure time differently here, not by clocks or sun position, but by tasks completed, meals eaten, stories told. Time becomes something you inhabit rather than watch. Halvard begins to speak, his voice low and rhythmic, telling a story you don't fully understand, but can follow through gesture and tone. Others join in, adding details, acting out parts. The Longhouse transforms into a theater where entertainment and education merge. These stories aren't just passing time. They're preserving history, teaching survival skills, maintaining the cultural knowledge that keeps the community alive, generation after generation. A child crawls over to you, peering with curious eyes before being gently pulled back by a mother's hand. The children here grow up knowing cold, darkness, and hardship as normal. They learn early to conserve warmth, to respect the fire, to understand that survival is a community effort. There's no coddling, but there's also deep care. Every child represents hope, a promise that life will continue beyond this winter and the next. You pull a fur closer around your shoulders and let the sounds of the Longhouse wash over you. The pop and hiss of the fire, the murmur of conversations in Old Norse, the rustle of movement as people shift in their furs, the occasional bleat from the goats, the wind testing the walls outside. All of it blends into a kind of Arctic lullaby, rough and honest. The smoke makes your eyes sting, but you're getting used to it. Your throat feels raw, but everyone else seems unbothered, their bodies adapted to months of breathing air that would make a modern person cough continuously. This is their normal, and slowly, impossibly, it's becoming yours too. As sleep begins to pull at you, you marvel at the simple fact of warmth. Without a proper fireplace, without central heating, without any of the technology you've always assumed was necessary for winter survival, these people thrive. Not just survive, but build families, tell stories, create art, maintain culture. The cold doesn't defeat them because they learn to live within its rules rather than fight against them. You drift off with the taste of smoke in your mouth and the sound of wind in your ears wrapped in furs that smell of lanolin and long use surrounded by strangers who are teaching you through their very existence that human resilience has depths you never imagined. The Arctic winter presses against the turf walls, patient and relentless. But inside this Longhouse, life persists with quiet, stubborn grace. Chapter 2, The Architecture of Survival. You wake to the sound of someone feeding the fire, the scrape of wood on stone as fresh fuel is added to the embers. It's still dark, though whether it's night or the perpetual twilight of Arctic winter days is impossible to tell. Your body aches from sleeping on the platform, muscles protesting the unfamiliar position, but you're warm. Against all expectation, wrapped in these furs with bodies on either side of you, you're actually warm. Sitting up carefully to avoid hitting your head on the low beams above, you begin to truly see the longhouse for the first time. In the dim firelight, its architecture reveals itself as a masterpiece of survival engineering. Every element has been chosen, placed, and maintained with ruthless practicality. This isn't a building in the modern sense. It's a survival machine, and understanding how it works is essential to appreciating how the Vikings endured months it should have killed them. The walls are the first marvel. You press your hand against the nearest one and feel layers. The outermost surface is frozen turf, cut in thick strips and stacked like bricks over a timber frame. Your fingers trace the irregular surface, feeling grass still embedded in the soil, roots holding it together even in death. This turf isn't decoration. It's insulation that works year-round, trapping warmth in winter and deflecting heat in summer. Between the turf and the inner wooden wall is a thick layer of something that feels like packed straw mixed with other materials. You'll learn later this filling includes animal hair, dried moss, and sometimes even manure. Everything that can trap air, that can create dead space where heat can't escape, it's packed into these walls. The result is a barrier sometimes 5 or 6 layers deep, a sandwich of natural materials that modern insulation struggles to match. The roof is just as carefully constructed. Looking up through the smoke haze, you can see how it slopes at a gentle angle, designed not for aesthetic appeal, but for shedding snow weight. The lowest point is barely above head height when standing, and the entire structure is deliberately squat, presenting minimal surface area to the wind. Turf covers the roof as well, sometimes a foot thick, creating a living blanket that actually grows grass in summer and becomes additional insulation in winter. That smoke hole you noticed yesterday is fascinating in its simplicity. It's not directly above the fire, but slightly offset, preventing rain and snow from falling straight into the flames while still allowing smoke to escape. The hole is small, just large enough to vent smoke without venting too much heat. Some days, when the wind is wrong, smoke fills the longhouse until eyes water and throats burn. Other days, the draft pulls perfectly, and the air is almost clear. The Vikings have learned to read the smoke, to understand what weather is coming based on how it moves. The floor itself is another element of the survival system. It's not wooden planks, but packed earth, sometimes covered with rushes or straw. This might seem primitive, but it serves multiple purposes. Earth provides thermal mass, absorbing heat during the day and releasing it slowly at night. It's also permeable, allowing some moisture from cooking and breathing to seep away rather than condensing on walls. In the animal section of the longhouse, where goats and cows live, this earthen floor makes waste management possible, if not pleasant. You watch as a woman named Ingrid carefully arranges fresh straw over a section of floor that has become compressed. She explains that they change this bedding regularly, not just for cleanliness, but because fresh straw contains air pockets that insulate better than packed material. Everything is about creating layers of trapped air, understanding that still air is one of nature's best insulators. The sleeping platforms along both walls are raised about 2 feet off the ground, and now you understand why. Heat rises, yes, but more importantly, the coldest air sinks. By sleeping elevated, the Vikings position themselves in the warmest layer of the longhouse. The space beneath the platforms serves as storage for food, tools, and supplies, making use of every cubic foot of interior space. You help Halvard reinforce a section of wall where wind has found a gap. The repair involves stuffing dried moss into the crack, then covering it with a mixture of clay and straw that will freeze solid, becoming part of the wall structure. He works with the patience of someone who knows this maintenance never ends. The longhouse requires constant attention, constant small repairs, or it will fail when you need it most. The door is another marvel of practical design. It's thick, made from heavy timber, and hung to open inward. This prevents snow from blocking it shut and means wind pressure actually helps seal it rather than forcing it open. A heavy fur curtain hangs just inside, creating an airlock of sorts. When someone enters or exits, the curtain minimizes the cold air that reaches the interior. You begin to notice how the longhouse is organized into zones. The center, around the fire, is the warmest and most public space. This is where people cook, eat, and socialize. Moving toward either end, the temperature drops slightly, and the space becomes more private. One end houses the livestock, their body heat contributing to the overall warmth, but their smell and mess kept somewhat separate. The opposite end often holds storage and sometimes a sleeping area for whoever drew the short straw, as it's the coldest part of the structure. The integration of animals into the living space seems strange at first, but the logic becomes clear as you spend time in the goat section. The body heat from even a few cows or goats raises the temperature noticeably. Their breath adds humidity that feels warmer than dry air. And crucially, they provide milk, meat, and materials, even in the depths of winter, when venturing outside for resources becomes nearly impossible. You watch a young boy carefully milking a goat, his movements practiced despite his age. The milk steams in the cold air, and he carries it carefully to his mother, who adds it to a pot warming near the fire. Nothing is wasted. The goat's body heat, its milk, even its waste, which will be dried and used as fuel. Everything serves the community's survival. The smoke-blackened beams overhead tell their own story. Centuries of winters have left them coated in soot, so thick it looks like black velvet. This coating isn't just dirt. It preserves the wood, protecting it from moisture and insects. Some of these beams have been in place longer than anyone can remember, passed from one generation to the next, growing stronger with age rather than weaker. You notice small carvings in some of the beams. Runes, symbols, simple pictures. These aren't decorative. They're protective, prayers carved into the bones of the house, asking gods and spirits to keep the structure sound through another winter. Whether they work through supernatural intervention, or simply through the act of making people pay attention to structural integrity, the result is the same. The longhouse stands. As the day progresses, you begin to understand that the longhouse isn't just shelter. It's a tool, carefully designed and constantly maintained, that allows human life to persist in an environment fundamentally hostile to it. Every element, from the turf walls to the earthen floor, from the raised sleeping platforms to the carefully positioned smoke hole, works together in a system refined over generations. The Vikings didn't survive Arctic winters despite lacking fireplaces. They survived because they understood something modern people have forgotten. Heat isn't something you create through brute force. It's something you conserve, trap, and share. The longhouse doesn't generate warmth so much as it refuses to let warmth escape. And that subtle but crucial difference makes all the difference between life and death. As evening approaches, bringing deeper darkness, you settle back onto your sleeping platform with new respect for the structure around you. It groans in the wind like a living thing, flexing slightly but never breaking. Snow piles against the walls, adding another layer of insulation. The fire in the center pit burns low, just enough to cook the evening meal, just enough to provide a focal point for the community gathering around it. You pull furs over yourself, feeling the weight of them, the warmth they trap. Around you, the longhouse breathes its slow rhythm, smoke curling toward the roof, timber settling, wind testing the walls, finding them solid. This place, this carefully constructed survival machine, has stood for years and will stand for years more, protecting the lives within through the darkest, coldest months the Arctic can conjure. Sleep comes easier tonight, your body learning to relax into the unusual circumstances. The smoke doesn't bother you as much. The sounds of goats and people feel almost comforting. And the cold, that relentless Arctic cold pressing against the turf walls, seems less threatening now that you understand the intelligence and care built into every element keeping it at bay. Chapter 3. The Rhythm of Darkness. You wake again. But the concept of waking becomes strange when there's no real difference between night and day. The longhouse exists in a perpetual twilight, with only the fire's glow and occasional glimpses through the smoke hole to suggest anything beyond the walls. Your internal clock, so reliable in the modern world, has become completely untethered. You might have slept for 2 hours or 10. Time has become elastic, measured not in minutes, but in the completion of tasks, the slow burn of hunger, the gradual accumulation of fatigue. The darkness of Arctic winter isn't something modern people truly understand. It's not just the absence of light, but a presence of its own, a weight that presses against windows and walls, seeping into thoughts and dreams. In this latitude, during the deepest winter months, the sun barely clears the horizon even at midday, offering a few hours of dim twilight before sliding back into darkness. Some days, it doesn't appear at all, leaving the world in varying shades of blue-black, like living underwater. You venture outside with Halvard, wrapped in layers of wool and fur that make you feel like an overstuffed scarecrow. The cold hits immediately, sharp enough to make your lungs ache, but it's the light, or lack of it, that stops you. The world is painted in monochrome. White snow, gray sky, black trees in the distance. No color, no warmth. Just this endless grayscale that makes you question whether color ever really existed. Halvard points to the horizon, where the faintest hint of lighter gray suggests the sun's path, though the sun itself remains invisible. This is noon, he explains, the brightest part of the day. You stand together in the blue twilight, breath creating small clouds, and you understand why the Vikings developed such rich mythologies about light and darkness. When you live like this, when weeks pass without real sunlight, the sun becomes more than a celestial body. It becomes hope, a god worth worshipping. The village around you is quiet, but not empty. Figures move through the snow, accomplishing necessary tasks before the light fades completely. Someone checks on livestock in a nearby barn. Another hauls firewood from a covered stack. Everyone moves with purpose, but without hurry, conserving energy, making each action count. There's no running here, no wasted movement. Every calorie burned must be earned back, and winter is a miser that gives nothing freely. Back inside the long house, people have developed strategies for managing the darkness that goes beyond simple survival. They create their own light, not just literally with the fire and occasional oil lamps made from fish oil and moss wicks, but metaphorically through activity, story, and structure. The day, such as it is, follows a rhythm established by necessity rather than sunlight. You watch as Ingrid works near the fire, using its light to thread a bone needle with sinew. Her daughter sits beside her, learning the same skill, squinting in the dim glow. This is winter education, skills passed from parent to child during the long dark months when outdoor work is impossible. A boy learns to carve fish hooks from bone. Another practices knot tying with rope made from twisted hair. Everything is practical, everything serves survival, but there's also beauty in the work, pride in craftsmanship. The fire itself becomes a kind of clock. People know roughly how long it takes certain types of wood or peat to burn. The position of the embers, the color of the coals, these become temporal markers more reliable than trying to track invisible sun movement. Morning is when the fire is fed back to life from overnight embers. Evening is when it's built up for cooking. Night is when it's allowed to die down to just enough heat to prevent freezing. Stories begin in the afternoon, though afternoon is more concept than reality. Halvard settles near the fire, and others gather around as if summoned by invisible signal. His voice, low and rhythmic, begins a tale you've heard pieces of before. Something about Thor and a giant, and a drinking contest that's really about the ocean. The children listen with wide eyes. The adults smile at familiar parts, sometimes interjecting corrections or additions. These stories serve multiple purposes beyond entertainment. They're history lessons, moral instruction, survival guides encoded in narrative. A tale about a hero surviving winter by sharing warmth with a bear teaches cooperation and resourcefulness. A story about a foolish man who ventured into a storm teaches respect for nature's power. Every saga carries lessons learned in blood and cold by previous generations. You notice something else about the darkness. It creates intimacy. In the dim firelight, faces become mysterious, shadows dancing across features, making everyone look slightly otherworldly. Conversations are quieter, more personal. There's nowhere to go, nothing to distract, so people actually talk to each other with an attention that feels almost forgotten in modern times. A woman named Astrid begins to sing, her voice rising above the crackle of the fire. Others join in, harmonizing in ways that suggest this is a well-practiced ritual. The song is haunting, melodic, filled with long vowels that echo in the space. You don't understand the words, but the emotion is universal. Longing, perhaps. Remembrance. Hope for spring. The music fills the long house, pushing back darkness with sound, creating warmth of a different kind. The children are released to play, and their games are revealing. They don't have toys in the modern sense, but they create elaborate scenarios with carved sticks, bone pieces, and scraps of cloth. You watch a girl organizing a miniature village with surprising complexity, acting out scenarios she's observed. Trade negotiations, marriage arrangements, even a mock raid complete with tiny weapons. Play is preparation here. Practice for adult roles they'll assume sooner than children in your world. As what you think is evening approaches, someone places a bowl of milk near the door. An offering, Ingrid explains, for the house spirits, the hidden folk who protect the home if properly respected. You're not sure if anyone truly believes in these spirits, or if it's simply tradition, a way of acknowledging that survival depends on forces beyond human control. Perhaps the distinction doesn't matter. The ritual creates cohesion, reminds everyone that they're part of something larger than themselves. Meal preparation begins, and the smells are simultaneously appealing and challenging. Fish stew with dried herbs and root vegetables. Flatbread cooked on hot stones. The ever-present smell of smoked meat. Your modern palate struggles with the lack of variety, the intense saltiness, the textures that are either too soft or too tough. But hunger is the best seasoning, and the warmth of hot food in your belly is genuinely comforting. After eating, people gradually settle into their sleeping areas. There's no clear division between waking and sleeping. Some drift off while others continue quiet conversations. A mother nurses an infant, her movements gentle in the firelight. An old man sits alone, staring into the embers, perhaps remembering winters past or dreaming of springs to come. You lie down on your platform, aware of the body warmth surrounding you. On one side, a person you now recognize as Bjorn, a teenage boy who helps with the livestock. On the other, a woman whose name you haven't learned, but whose breathing has become familiar. This closeness would be uncomfortable in your world, invasive even. Here, it's essential. Personal space is a luxury no one can afford. The darkness presses close as the fire burns lower. Not complete blackness, the embers provide a faint red glow, but dark enough that you could almost forget where you are. Almost believe you refloating in some vast empty space, with only the breathing of others to anchor you to reality. Sleep comes in waves, not the solid block of unconsciousness you're used to, but something more fluid. You wake partially, shift position, drift off again, all without fully emerging from the dream world. In the deepest part of the night, you hear it again. That low hum from the ice, the sound of a frozen world settling into itself. Or perhaps it's the wind, or timber contracting in the cold, or your own mind creating patterns in silence. The Vikings don't seem disturbed. This is their lullaby, the sound of winter's presence, and they've learned to sleep through it, embracing it even. You understand now why the Vikings developed such rich dream traditions, why they believed dreams carried messages from gods and ancestors. When you live in darkness this profound, when the boundary between waking and sleeping becomes blurred, the dream world becomes as real as the physical one. Your own dreams are vivid tonight. Forests of ice, animals made of snow, voices speaking in languages you shouldn't understand, but somehow do. The longhouse breathes around you, its timbers creaking, smoke drifting, warmth slowly dissipating into the cold night. Outside, the Arctic world is hostile, frozen, deadly. But inside, wrapped in furs and community, surrounded by centuries of accumulated survival wisdom, life persists. Not comfortably, not easily, but stubbornly, determinedly, with a resilience that makes you reconsider what humans are capable of enduring when necessity demands it. Chapter 4. The community of warmth mourning, if it can be called that, begins with the sound of the fire being rebuilt. Someone you never see who rises in the darkness to add fuel, coaxing flames from embers that have burned all night. This is crucial work, unglamorous but essential. Let the fire die completely, and restarting it in Arctic conditions becomes a desperate struggle. Keep it alive, and life continues. You've been in the longhouse long enough now that the patterns have become familiar. The way people move through their days without sun to guide them. The tasks that mark time more reliably than any clock. The intricate web of relationships and dependencies that keeps everyone alive. You're beginning to understand that Viking survival wasn't individual heroism, but collective intelligence, a community functioning as a single organism. The sharing of warmth goes far beyond simple proximity. You watch as an elderly woman, her hands gnarled with age and cold, struggles to prepare food. Without being asked, a younger woman moves to help, guiding the older hands, sharing not just warmth, but capability. Later, when a child coughs through the night, multiple people take turns sitting with him, their presence and body heat part of the treatment. The livestock represent another layer of this shared survival. You spend time in the animal section, which you've been avoiding due to the smell, and discover a more complex ecosystem than expected. The cows and goats aren't just tolerating human proximity. They've adapted to it, generations of selection producing animals comfortable in close quarters, docile enough to live among families without constant panic. A young girl named Signy shows you how she cares for the goats. Her movements are gentle, affectionate even, as she brushes ice from their fur and checks their hooves for damage. These animals are food, warmth, and materials, yes, but they're also partners in survival, and they receive respect and care accordingly. When one goat seems ill, the concern is genuine, practical, and immediate. Loss of an animal means loss of resources the community can't spare. You help muck out the animal section, a task that's exactly as pleasant as it sounds, but you notice how even this waste serves a purpose. Dried dung becomes fuel for the fire when wood is scarce. Mixed with straw, it can be added to walls for additional insulation. Nothing is wasted because waste is a luxury only the wealthy can afford, and winter makes everyone poor. The social dynamics of the longhouse reveal themselves slowly. There's a hierarchy, of course. Astrid and Halvard clearly hold authority, but it's softer than you expected. Decisions are discussed, not commanded. When a question arises about rationing remaining food stores, multiple voices contribute. The consensus that emerges feels collective rather than imposed. Conflicts happen, inevitable when people live in such close quarters. You witness a heated argument between two men about something you can't follow. Voices rising, hands gesturing. But the disagreement doesn't escalate into violence. Others intervene, not with force, but with a reminder of mutual dependence. Anger is expensive here, requiring energy that's better spent on survival. Grudges are luxuries. You notice how children are raised communally. Biological parents clearly have primary responsibility, but every adult watches every child, corrects them, teaches them, protects them. A toddler wanders too close to the fire and is scooped up by the nearest adult, regardless of whose child she is. A boy struggling with a task receives patient instruction from whoever notices first. The children belong to the whole community, not just individual families. The concept of privacy has almost disappeared. You've watched people relieve themselves in designated areas with minimal concealment. Bodies are exposed for washing, for treating injuries, for the simple necessities of life. Embarrassment seems to have been worn away by necessity, replaced by practical acceptance of human physicality. Everyone has a body, everyone has needs, and false modesty serves no purpose. Yet there are still private moments, carefully carved out and respected. When a couple wants intimacy, others turn away. Conversations grow louder to provide audio privacy. Children are distracted elsewhere. When someone is clearly struggling emotionally, space is created despite the physical constraints. The Vikings understand that humans need both connection and solitude, and they've learned to provide both within impossible limitations. The food sharing is particularly revealing. Meals are communal, eaten from common pots, but portions are carefully measured to ensure fairness. The elderly and very young receive slightly more, compensating for their vulnerability. Those doing heavy physical labor get extra. It's not perfect equality, but practical equity, each according to their needs and contributions. You watch as Halvard carefully divides a piece of preserved fish, his movements deliberate. Everyone receives the same amount, including himself, including you. In a world of scarcity, this fairness isn't kindness exactly. It's survival strategy. Resentment would tear the community apart faster than cold or hunger. So fairness is maintained with almost religious devotion. The evening brings another communal activity, repair work. Every tool, every piece of clothing, every implement is examined regularly and mended before small problems become catastrophic failures. A broken knife handle is reattached with careful precision. A torn cloak is stitched closed with thread made from animal sinew. Fishing nets are checked and repaired one knot at a time. This maintenance work is social. People gather in the firelight, hands busy, voices sharing stories, jokes, gossip. You try your hand at various tasks and discover your modern skills are worse than useless here. Your stitching is clumsy, your carving awkward. A child half your age demonstrates techniques you can barely follow, but no one mocks you. They teach, patient, and thorough, because incompetence threatens everyone's survival. As you work, you think about modern individualism, the idea that each person should be self-sufficient, independent. Here, that concept would be deaf. Survival requires acknowledging dependence, embracing it even. You need other people's skills, warmth, knowledge, labor, and they need yours, such as they are. This mutual dependence creates bonds that modern relationships rarely achieve. The night deepens, though deep and shallow have lost meaning in this endless twilight. The fire burns low again. People begin settling into their sleeping arrangements. The nightly ritual of arranging furs, finding positions, creating the complex human puzzle that maximizes warmth distribution. You've learned where to position yourself, how to curl to both give and receive heat, how to breathe shallowly to avoid disturbing others. Lying there in the darkness, listening to the symphony of breathing, snoring, sighing, you feel something unexpected. Gratitude. Not for the hardship. You'll be relieved when this experience ends, but for the lesson. These people have shown you what humans are capable of. Not just endurance, though there's plenty of that, but cooperation, ingenuity, the ability to create warmth and life in places that should be lifeless and frozen. The long house has become familiar now. Its smoke-stained beams, earthen floor, perpetual twilight. You've learned its sounds, the warning creaks that mean snow is piling too heavily on one section of roof. The particular hiss of the fire when someone adds damp wood, the different snores of different sleepers. This place, so alien at first, has become, if not home, then at least understandable. Spring is coming, though you can't see it yet. The elders say they can feel it in the wind, taste it in the air. The snow is slightly softer, the darkness fractionally shorter. Soon, very soon, the sun will return for more than just a brief gray appearance. The world will thaw. Life will emerge from this frozen pause. But for now, for this moment, you're still wrapped in furs in an Arctic longhouse, surrounded by Vikings who've taught you that fire isn't the only source of warmth. Community is warmth. Knowledge is warmth. Preparation is warmth. The willingness to share, to cooperate, to endure together, that's warmth too. And it burns just as bright as any flame. You close your eyes, feeling the presence of sleepers around you, the solid walls keeping the worst of the cold at bay, the faint glow of embers that will burn until morning. The Arctic winter continues outside, patient and eternal. But inside this carefully constructed space, inside this community of people who've learned to survive the unsurvivable, life persists. Warm, stubborn, and impossibly resilient. Sleep takes you gently this time, pulling you down into dreams that mix past and present, fire and ice, darkness, and the promise of returning light. Somewhere in the distance, the ice hums its low song. The wind tests the walls and finds them strong. And in the heart of winter's domain, humans sleep and dream and survive another night, just as they've done for countless generations, just as they'll do for countless more. The longhouse breathes, the fire glows, the community rests. And you, a visitor from a distant future, drift into sleep, knowing you've witnessed something profound. Not conquest or glory, but something better. The quiet, determined survival of people who refuse to let impossible circumstances defeat them, who built warmth from cooperation and intelligence when the world offered only cold and darkness. Tomorrow, you'll wake to another twilight day. More tasks, more stories, more of the endless winter routine. But tonight, wrapped in fur and community, you rest. The Vikings sleep around you. They're breathing a reminder that you're not alone, that survival is never a solo achievement. And in the peaceful darkness of the longhouse, that's enough. More than enough. It's everything. Chapter 5. The first light of spring, you wake to something different. A sensation so subtle, you almost miss it at first. The air feels lighter somehow, less oppressive. The darkness inside the longhouse seems fractionally less deep. You lie still on your sleeping platform, trying to identify what's changed, and then you hear it. Water, the faint sound of dripping, of melting, of ice surrendering to something warmer. Spring is announcing itself, not with fanfare, but with whispers. The transformation is so gradual that if you weren't paying attention, you might sleep through the most important moment of the Viking year. But the people around you are paying attention. They've been waiting for this, watching for signs, interpreting the smallest changes with the intensity of scholars reading sacred texts. Halvard is already awake, standing near the door, his head tilted as if listening to a conversation only he can hear. You join him, and he gestures outside without speaking. Together you push through the fur curtain and step into a world that's subtly, impossibly different from the one you've known for weeks. The sky is lighter, not day exactly, but no longer the oppressive darkness that's defined your existence. The horizon shows a band of pale gray that suggests the sun remembers this place exists. The air temperature hasn't changed dramatically. You can still see your breath. Your face still stings with cold, but something in the quality of the air itself feels different. Less brittle, more forgiving. Around the longhouse, icicles that have hung motionless for months are dripping. Slow, measured drops that fall like a countdown to transformation. The snow underfoot has changed texture. Where it was powdery and squeaky, it's now slightly granular, almost crystalline. Each footstep leaves a different kind of print, deeper, wetter, temporary. Other members of the community emerge from their dwellings, drawn by the same subtle changes. No one speaks at first. They simply stand in the half-light, faces turned toward where the sun will eventually appear, breathing air that tastes different. You realize you're witnessing a ritual older than memory. humans acknowledging the return of light after months of darkness. A child breaks the silence with a laugh, pure and sudden, as she slides in the softening snow. The sound seems to break a spell, and suddenly the settlement comes alive with a different kind of energy than you've witnessed before. Not the careful conservation of winter, but something more expansive. Hope, perhaps, or relief, or simply the body's response to lengthening light. Back inside the long house, the morning routine feels different. People move with slightly more purpose, slightly less heaviness. Conversations that have been muted for months grow fractionally louder. Someone starts singing while preparing food, a light tune that would have seemed inappropriately cheerful weeks ago, but now feels exactly right. Ingrid catches your eye and smiles. "The worst is over?" she says simply. "We survived another one." There's pride in her voice, but also something else. Gratitude, maybe, or wonder that the same miracle has happened again, that winter has loosened its grip and life can continue. The changes accelerate over the following days. Each time you venture outside, the world looks more different. The snow begins to pull away from the longhouse walls, revealing the turf beneath, dark and sodden. Patches of bare ground appear, looking almost obscene after months of unbroken white. Water runs in tiny channels, finding paths down slopes, pooling in depressions, creating a geography of sound where before there was only silence. The sun finally makes a proper appearance. Not just a suggestion of light, but actual sun, visible above the horizon for minutes that gradually extend to hours. The first time you see your shadow, crisp and dark on the snow, you stop walking and simply stare. You'd forgotten shadows existed. Everyone has. The children chase their shadows like they're alive, delighted by this game that's simultaneously new and ancient. With the light comes color. Subtle at first, just hints that the world contains shades beyond white and gray and black. The sky shows traces of blue. The turf walls of the long house reveal brown and green. Someone's cloak is actually red, a fact impossible to know in the darkness. The world is being painted back into existence, and you watch it happen with an appreciation impossible to feel if you hadn't spent months in monochrome. The routines inside the long house begin shifting. The fire, so carefully tended through the dark months, receives slightly less attention. It's allowed to burn lower, not from neglect, but from reduced necessity. The smoke hole, which has been the settlement's only connection to the world above, no longer seems quite so precious. The door opens more frequently, stays open longer, as if the longhouse itself is eager to remember what fresh air feels like. Work begins transitioning from indoor maintenance to outdoor preparation. The men examine tools that will be needed for spring activities. Fishing equipment is checked and repaired. Hunting implements are sharpened. The women begin planning for tasks that require daylight and mobility. Repairs to the longhouse exterior that were impossible in deep winter become urgent priorities. The livestock sense the change most dramatically. The goats and cows that have shared your living space for months become restless, eager for the outside world. Their calls become more frequent, more insistent. Plans are made for transitioning them to outdoor pens, though this must be done gradually. Animals, like humans, can be damaged by too rapid change. You help dig out paths through the softening snow, clearing ways between buildings, creating access to storage areas that have been buried for months. The physical labor feels good after weeks of relative inactivity. Your muscles protest, but it's a welcome pain. The ache of use rather than the stiffness of confinement. Water becomes both resource and challenge. The settlement's water source, frozen solid through winter, begins to flow again. But this means managing melt, preventing flooding, directing water away from structures. You watch as Vikings who've done this dozens of times carefully channel runoff, working with the terrain, understanding through generations of experience exactly how water will move through this landscape. Food stores are assessed with new urgency. What remains must last until new food can be harvested or hunted, but the calculation has changed. Spring brings possibilities that winter denied. Fish will return to accessible waters. Birds will migrate through. Plants will begin growing. The settlement isn't dependent solely on what was preserved months ago. A hunting party prepares to venture beyond the immediate area for the first time in months. The men who will go seem younger somehow, energized by the prospect. They check their skis, their weapons, their supplies with meticulous care. Winter hunting is possible, but desperately dangerous. Spring hunting, while still challenging, offers better odds of success and return. The women begin different preparations. Seeds, carefully preserved through winter, are examined and sorted. Tools for planting are located and checked. Conversations turn to where to plant what, which fields to use, how to maximize the short growing season. Every decision matters. An error in spring planting could mean hunger next winter. You notice changes in social dynamics as well. The forced intimacy of winter begins to relax slightly. People spend more time outside, creating natural space between themselves and others. Conversations that couldn't happen in the crowded longhouse now take place during work, creating privacy through activity. Couples walk together along cleared paths. Children roam farther from the longhouse than they have in months. The dreams change too. For weeks, your sleep has been filled with dark, claustrophobic imagery, tunnels and caves, and endless night. Now your dreams fill with color and space. You dream of forests in full leaf, of running water, of warmth on your face. The other Vikings report similar shifts. Winter dreams giving way to spring anticipation. On what Halvard declares is the first true day of spring, the community gathers outside at what passes for midday. The sun is actually visible, actually providing not just light, but perceptible warmth. Everyone stands together, faces turned upward, simply existing in sunlight. No one speaks. There's nothing to say that this moment doesn't already express. You understand now what you couldn't have understood before. Spring isn't just a season for these people. It's a victory. Proof that their strategies worked, their preparations were sufficient, their community was strong enough. They fought darkness and cold and scarcity and isolation, and they won. Not easily, not comfortably, but definitively. They survived. As the sun begins its slow arc toward the horizon, still low but undeniably present, you feel the warmth on your face and understand the depth of Viking gratitude for light. You've lived through darkness that most modern people can't imagine. You've felt the weight of winter in your bones, in your thoughts, in your dreams. And now, impossibly, miraculously, the light has returned. That evening, the longhouse feels different. Still necessary, still home, but no longer a fortress under siege. The fire burns cheerfully rather than desperately. Conversations are lighter, punctuated with laughter. Someone produces a musical instrument, a simple flute carved from bone, and plays a melody that feels like spring sounds like hope. You settle into your sleeping furs that night, knowing this might be one of the last times you sleep this way. Soon the weather will be mild enough for different arrangements. The communal warmth that sustained everyone through the darkness will become less critical. The longhouse will transform again, from winter survival shelter to spring gathering place. But tonight, you're grateful for these furs, for the bodies sleeping near you, for the solid walls and the smoke-stained beams. This place saved your life, saved all these lives. And as you drift toward sleep, warm and fed, and surrounded by people who've taught you what humans are truly capable of, you whisper a thank you to the longhouse itself, to the Vikings who built it and maintain it, to the winter that tested you, and the spring that's finally, beautifully arriving. The last thing you hear before sleep takes you is water dripping, ice melting, the world transforming. Tomorrow, there will be more light, more warmth, more possibilities. But tonight, in this moment between winter and spring, between darkness and light, you rest in the peace of having survived something that should have been impossible. The Arctic winter tried its worst, and humanity, through Through intelligence and cooperation and stubborn determination, endured. The longhouse breathes its eternal rhythm one more time. The fire glows. The community sleeps. And outside, under a sky that's beginning to remember stars, the world slowly, beautifully, inevitably thaws.